Good morning podcast. If you guys are watching this live on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, well then good morning. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'm gonna get right into that, but let's get right into it.
I swear to God, you stupid bitch.
Put it out the coupe at the lot, trying to fuck 12 bucks swat, bustin' all the tails out the box, get a leaf in the box.
So yeah, I've been making podcasts on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It is just now going across 2 new platforms. It's actually really going at a really high rate, and I actually have some very good news coming up for you guys that have been like personal friends or whatever in the next month. I've been working on it for a very long time, probably about 3 months now, and it's finally coming part for this summer, and I'm really excited, and it's one of the only positive things coming in 2020. So I decided to bring this podcast over to YouTube and do it in a camera way. So my podcast going here on my personal computer, and I have also my webcam there for the podcast and editing system here. But I'm also using my camera right here to project this. So while I'm speaking live, I'm also recording for YouTube. And I have different cameras going, so it's all working at the same time. Only way I can make it possible. So sorry for the long introduction, but I decided let's start it on YouTube. But today we're going to talk about the Cowboys. This is a Cowboys podcast. And I have 3 different segments that I do every episode or every version of my podcast. So we're going to talk about the Cowboys free agent signings. I'm going to talk about 3 today. Blake Bell, Jeremy McCoy, and Donatari Poe. We made other signings or re-signings like Anthony Brown and all them. But I think Jeremy McCoy is the most important. It was a 3-year deal, very cheap. I know this is all late news, but I'm going to cover it on the YouTube podcast, and this is like the 5th time me talking about it on my Apple Podcast and Spotify. If you guys do want to watch it live on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, I have over 10K daily viewers, which is really exciting. It's my same YouTube channel, and I also have one on Brocky and Posh, which is cowboysnews.net, and that's what my other podcast names are on. So, yeah, Blake Bell, first one, Blake Bell from Kansas City. With our tight end situation, we have Blake Jarwin and then Dalton Schultz. If you guys are a Cowboys fan, you know Dalton Schultz sucks. He was 4th-round pick. He had 1 catch this year. It was actually really a nice one. He held on to the ball after a huge hit. But other than that, he hasn't been much of a throwing, like a guy to throw the ball to on first and second down. He's more of a blocking tight end, and he usually lines up on the left side when he is on the field. And he tends to get blown up on. He just gets pancaked from the defensive standpoint, which is always something that you don't want for a blocking tight end. And he really can't run routes that well, and he was drafted because he was a blocking tight end. And then adding a guy like Blake Bell, who's a blocking tight end as well, but has potential to run routes. He was a receiver in college, just like Blake Jarwin. So he has the ability to run routes, and he also has several abilities to block. He was one of the best blocking tight ends in the league, and that's why Kansas City had him behind Travis Kelce. So I give that signing an A. I think it's really underrated, and I just think a lot of Cowboys fans are like, oh, it's just a depth signing. No, I would watch out for him next season. He's going to catch a lot of balls. Because you look at Blake Jarwin with the number 2, with Jason Wynn as the number 1, Blake Jarwin was very productive, and Mike McCarthy, he likes to do that 2 tight end boot. Like in 2016, we saw Richard Rodgers and Jared Cook. Those guys were lighting it up, and none of them were number 1 tight ends, but they were both used as number 1 tight ends. Next one, General McCoy. I think it's really not. I think it's really nice. You know, we lose Malik Collins, we lose Daniel Wise, we lose a bunch, we lose Michael Bennett, Robert Quinn, a lot of guys on that D line. So if we get Randy Gregory back, it'll be Randy Gregory, Antoine Woods, or Donatari Poe. I don't know who will be the one of the starters, but General McCoy and Tank Lawrence. Other than that, I don't think this team, or that D-line, has any more depth other than, because we lost Kerry Hyder, too, to San Francisco. So I think that'll be a need in our 6th. We don't have a 6th pick, but our 5th and 7th round picks, it'll probably be D-line. And then Donatari Poe, we've kind of already addressed it. But in honor of that, I made some free agents. I made a list of free agents that the Cowboys should sign that are still available. Number 1, Logan Ryan. Played a long time in New England, some time in Tennessee. Has that Matt Patricia defense, that zone coverage and the press, and then Tennessee, as well as Mike Vrabel's defense, was very successful there. I don't know how he's still in the market, but he is, and I think that'd be an easy brainer for the Jones family to pick up because he is one of the top 5 defensive players available and a top 5 quarter that was available during free agency, other than a guy like Chris Harris and all them, and Darius Slay, who was on a trade block. He wasn't a free agent. Number 2, Cameron Wake. I think we could use an edge rusher like a Robert Quinn to replace, or Cameron Wake to replace Robert Quinn. I think that's something that we could use. And he's veteran. He probably wants a 1-year deal if he has anything left in the tank, which he does. Last year, he had a really solid season for a 3-4 linebacker. Number 3, James Hunt, who played for the Ravens last year. He's a tackle. We lost a lot of offensive lineman depth. We lost Xavier Su'a-Filo. We lost Cam Fleming. And then with Travis Frederick out, we have no depth other than Connor McGovern. He's our only other offensive lineman on the team that can play. Well, that's not a starter. We have Tyron Smith, Connor Williams, Joe Looney, Zach Martin, Leo Collins. Other than that, our only guy is Connor McGovern, which is kind of scary. So I think a nice tackle who sat behind a very good offensive line coach for 2 years, I think would be really nice. And then safety Sherrick McManus, who played for the Bears last year, was a role player. Didn't play too much, but when he was very effective. Kind of like a Jordan Lewis for the Dallas Cowboys last year. Even though it's different positions, didn't get starting playing time till late in the season. And when he did get playing time, he took full capability of it. And then wide receiver Justin Hardy, who played for Atlanta his whole career. I think the Cowboys should make a move for him because, number 1, he's right in his prime. He's a speedster. We have a lot of speedsters on the team that can't play the slot. Ventel Bryant, I don't know if we're going to bring him back because he just got arrested a couple days ago, or actually weeks ago at this point. We have Devin Smith, who I'm a huge fan of. We have Cedric Wilson, who is a slot receiver, who can, if he can stay healthy, man, he's really, really talented. But other than that, we really don't have depth. We haven't found a replacement for Randall Cobb. Hopefully it's Des Bryant, but if not, I think Justin Hardy can be a nice pickup. And last but not least, linebacker Mike Hull, who played for Miami last year. I think that's a depth rotation. We have Luke Gifford, who will be healthy, who was a rookie last year, who's undrafted, and he'll be in that rotation along with Sean Lee, Leighton Vander Esch, and Jalen Smith. Obviously, we have Justin March, but we did lose a lot of guys over the past 2 years, like Anthony Hitchens, Damian Wilson, and obviously our linebacking was hurting. We had Joe Thomas, who we brought back as well, and we also had Kyle Kiro, who we let walk. So I think a nice linebacker depth along with Gifford would be nice, and Sean Lee, we did bring back on a 1-year deal. And then on my Twitter, I ask a couple questions like I do. Since this is the first podcast, I'll be going into YouTube. Here is some of the questions. I do 3 questions every podcast. Here's today's 3 questions. Let me check on my phone. Okay. Where do you think Cam Newton will sign? Where I think Cam Newton will sign, I think he's going to go to L.A., the Chargers. 2 days ago, they just posted a video of Tyrod Taylor, who they announced their starting quarterback will be, and Cam Newton working out together. And obviously, they're actually really good friends. And Tyrod Taylor is a winning quarterback who can bring Cam Newton in. And I think if Tyrod Taylor doesn't do well, I think the Chargers are in win-now mode. That defense is stacked. And Austin Eckler and those weapons on that offense are so talented. Excuse me. And I think if Tyrod Taylor doesn't win, I think Cam Newton would be an easy guy to come in and replace him. So I think I think LA is where Cam Newton's going to go. And let's look at our second question. Where will Jadeveon Clowney go? Oh. It all depends on how much he's asking for. I predicted way back when free agency first started he would go to Tennessee. But they took on... Because they dumped Jarrell Casey's contract, but they took on a couple from other teams, and they'll dump swaps or picks. I think that's a perfect spot, or I was trying to say spot and fit at the same time, and then it come out right. I think that's a perfect place for Jadeveon Clowney to go. Small market, not a lot of noise around him. Obviously, in Houston, he just with big names on that team, he couldn't really deal with it. On Tennessee, there's no big names besides Derrick Henry. Anything about it in NFL news and stuff, he's not a big name, quote unquote. But I think that is a good fit for him. But where do I think he will sign? Ideally, or predicting, I think it's Miami. They have so much cap space, and that defense with Kyle Van Noy, Byron Jones, they had a Czech Lawson. That team is so good. And also, they have a couple other guys on that sleeper, like Xavier Howard, who's a beast. They cut Rashad Jones, that was like $12 million they freed up, so they could afford Jadeveon Clowney, no hurry. And the last question, who do we get with the draft? I honestly think we should trade down. Because at 17, there's no player that's perfect for that spot. I think we want C.J. Henderson. We filled that safety spot with HaHa Clinton-Dix. And if we move Xavier Woods to the free safety position, I think we should trade down with the team, like maybe the Tennessee Titans at 31, and get a couple second or third round picks to trade down. And C.J. Henderson will still be there, or even if Xavier McKinney's there at 31, which it seems like he's going to drop in the draft, I think that's perfectly fine as well. So that's what I think we should do in the draft. I think we should definitely get a corner. If it is C.J. Henderson, I'll be really, really happy. I think that's the best corner in the draft other than Jeff Okudah. And get some picks if we do trade back because he's going to be there. Or we can put those picks together and trade up and get Jeff Okudah, but I don't think that'll happen. But if you guys did enjoy this podcast, I'm going to end it early on YouTube. If you guys want to catch this full version of the podcast, go to my Apple Podcast and my Spotify podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching.